This was how Weinstein operated. He didn't just produce films. He orchestrated relationships. Every gala, every sponsorship, every after-party was part of a larger ecosystem designed to reinforce his dominance. He surrounded himself with rising actresses, often under the guise of mentorship. Some saw opportunity, others saw danger, but all of them knew the unspoken rule. When Harvey Weinstein invited you to a meeting, you said yes. According to one account from a producer's assistant, Meghan was introduced to Weinstein during a small dinner meeting at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. It wasn't private, the assistant insisted. There were 5 or 6 people there, but he focused on her immediately, asked about her work, about suits, about what kind of roles she wanted. Weinstein reportedly praised her poise and suggested that she consider branching into film. He said she had the face for global cinema, the assistant recalled. It was the kind of line he used all the time, but it worked. For Meghan, it was validation from one of the most powerful men in the industry. For Weinstein, it was routine. But beneath that interaction, something else was happening. A delicate game of power and perception. Weinstein had a talent for making people feel chosen, for blurring the line between professional opportunity and personal connection. He would compliment, promise, and insinuate until his targets didn't know whether they were networking or negotiating something else entirely. In the weeks following that dinner, Meghan's team reportedly received follow-ups from Weinstein's office, suggestions for additions, potential collaborations, even informal invites to events. Nothing overtly inappropriate, nothing that could be called predatory on paper. It was the slow tightening of a net. This was how Weinstein built control, not through coercion at first, but through access. Once you were in his circle, it was difficult to leave without consequence. Around this time, Meghan was beginning to cultivate her public voice outside of acting. She wrote essays about women's empowerment and the importance of self-worth. The irony wasn't lost on those who later examined this period of her life, her advocacy emerging just as she navigated one of the most manipulative power structures in Hollywood. Was it resistance or self-preservation disguised as moral stance? Only she would know. Still, there were signs that Meghan understood the danger. An acquaintance who worked in PR recalled Meghan confiding that certain producers made her uncomfortable. She never mentioned names, but her tone suggested frustration rather than fear. She said she was tired of men pretending to be mentors when they wanted something else, the acquaintance said. That statement, now seen through the lens of Weinstein's later downfall, carries a heavy weight. As Weinstein's empire continued to expand, he began investing in projects that blurred the lines between commercial success and critical prestige. Meghan's growing profile could have fit perfectly into that mold. She was photogenic, educated, articulate, and racially diverse. A modern face for a changing Hollywood. The timing was uncanny. Some within his network even pushed for her to be considered for supporting roles in Weinstein-affiliated productions. None materialized, but the correspondence suggests she was on their radar. If there were meetings beyond those first few encounters, they left no public trace. Yet years later, when Weinstein mentioned her name in that prison interview, it didn't sound like he was recalling a stranger. There was familiarity in his tone, a suggestion that he remembered more than just a passing introduction. Whether that familiarity came from personal interaction or from his usual habit of manufacturing intimacy remains a mystery. For Meghan, any past proximity to Weinstein's circle became a liability. Once his statement went public, investigators began tracing her Hollywood history with surgical precision. Old event lists, archived photographs, and leaked guest databases were examined for overlap. One in particular, from a 2012 Toronto International Film Festival afterparty, seemed to show Meghan's name alongside Weinstein's. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough for tabloids to run with. The connection between Meghan and Weinstein became the story's beating heart, unprovable yet irresistible. And every time her team refused to comment, the silence sounded like confirmation. For the palace, it was a nightmare scenario. A royal duchess linked, however tangentially, to one of history's most notorious predators. For Meghan, it was déjà vu. A return to the relentless scrutiny she thought she had escaped by leaving Hollywood. And so, the speculation grew. Some claimed Weinstein exaggerated their connection to tarnish her reputation. Others believed she was collateral damage in his ongoing battle for relevance. But there was a third theory, whispered among journalists who had covered both Hollywood and the royals, that Weinstein's words were not random at all, but part of a calculated move to expose what he saw as hypocrisy. Meghan had become a global advocate for women's rights, yet once moved within the same circles that had silenced victims for decades. That contradiction, whether fair or not, became fuel for a narrative too tempting for the media to ignore. And through it all, one question persisted. What did Weinstein truly mean when he said, "We got intimate"? Was it a literal admission? Or was it a metaphor for proximity, the way two people's paths might cross within the same ruthless industry? Maybe it was neither. Maybe it was something darker, a reminder that in Hollywood, intimacy isn't always physical, it's transactional. As this chapter closes, what emerges isn't a scandal with clear answers, but a portrait of an industry built on blurred boundaries and power imbalances. Meghan's connection to Weinstein, real, exaggerated, or invented, has become a symbol of that murky world where ambition and exploitation coexist. And now that the connection has been dragged into the light, the story moves beyond speculation. Because the next part of this saga, the one Weinstein hinted at but never fully explained, takes us into the places where reputation, power, and secrecy collide. And once those doors open, there's no going back. The story of that night has never been fully confirmed, only reconstructed through fragments, whispers, leaked emails, and secondhand recollections from people who say they were there. But every retelling begins the same way, with a meeting in a hotel suite, the setting that became both Harvey Weinstein's signature and his downfall. The invitation came under the guise of professionalism. Meghan had been told that Weinstein was interested in discussing potential collaborations, possibly involving an independent film that could bridge her television success to the big screen. She wasn't the only actress to receive such invitations. It was how business was done, or at least how people were led to believe it was done. A casual conversation over a drink, an informal audition away from the noise of the studio. That was the culture, and for an ambitious actress with rising visibility, declining such offers often meant career suicide. The location was the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills, a place that dripped luxury from the marble lobby to the private elevators. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows, gilding the air with a deceptive calm. Meghan arrived dressed professionally, her demeanor calm but alert. The person who arranged the meeting had told her it was informal, just a quick chat with Harvey and a few others. But when she arrived, there were no others. Just Weinstein. Accounts from that day differ. Some say Meghan stayed for less than 20 minutes. Others claim she was there for nearly an hour. Whatever the truth, the atmosphere in that room would later become the center of every rumor, every headline, every whispered theory. Imagine the power dynamic. Weinstein seated like a king in his own domain, the curtains drawn, the air-conditioned hum filling the silence. He had built his reputation on making careers and destroying them with equal ease. To women in the industry, a meeting with him was both an opportunity and a warning. Meghan, seasoned enough by then to recognize the stakes, reportedly kept the conversation strictly professional. She talked about her work on Suits, her ambitions beyond television, and her interest in roles that carried meaning. Weinstein, according to a source familiar with his patterns, was charming at first. He praised her composure, her intelligence, her voice. He said she had star potential, a phrase he used like currency. He asked about her family, her upbringing, her goals. Then, as with so many others before her, the tone shifted. Compliments turned into insinuations. The conversation blurred from career talk to something personal. He mentioned private screenings, exclusive dinners, mentorship. There is no record of what exactly was said next. No camera, no recording, no witness to verify. But whatever happened in that suite left a mark, whether emotional, psychological, or merely symbolic. Because from that point on, Meghan's path through Hollywood seemed to change. She began declining certain invitations, refusing particular roles, and stepping away from some of the circles that had once courted her. Years later, when Weinstein said, "We got intimate." People immediately thought of that night. But intimacy doesn't always mean what people assume. It could mean a moment of vulnerability, an uncomfortable silence, a power imbalance so sharp it cuts. It could mean that he felt she understood his game, perhaps even beat him at it by walking away before he could pull her in. To Weinstein, who thrived on control, that might have felt like an intimacy of a different kind. A former assistant of his later described a conversation Weinstein allegedly had not long after that meeting. "He mentioned her once," the assistant recalled, "said she was clever, said she knew how to read a room, that she didn't give him what he expected." The assistant didn't elaborate on what that expectation was, but everyone in that office knew what Weinstein usually wanted. The implication was clear. She had managed to escape unscathed, something few women did. If that was true, it explained why her name lingered in his mind for so long. Weinstein was obsessed with control, and Meghan had taken that control away from him. When he later invoked her name, perhaps it wasn't about physical closeness at all, but about resentment. To him, intimacy could mean defiance, an interaction that bruised his ego. The image of Meghan leaving that hotel suite, poised, silent, unreadable, has become almost cinematic in retellings. Some imagine her walking quickly through the lobby, ignoring the stares of hotel staff who had seen too much over the years. Others picture her pausing at the door, realizing in that moment that this industry demanded sacrifices she was no longer willing to make. Either way, something changed after that. In the months that followed, Meghan's career seemed to stabilize rather than skyrocket. She stayed with Suits, turning down a few film offers. She began focusing on humanitarian causes, writing essays, aligning herself with advocacy rather than glamour. To the casual observer, it looked like a natural evolution. To those who knew the industry's undercurrents, it looked like a quiet retreat. But Hollywood has a long memory, and nothing truly disappears. When Weinstein fell years later and his empire crumbled under the weight of his victims' testimonies, many people began revisiting old stories. Meghan's name resurfaced in private conversations, never publicly, never in print, but always with that knowing tone. "She met him once, didn't she?" someone would say, and the others would nod, unwilling to speak but unwilling to forget. When Weinstein finally broke his silence from prison and uttered those words, "We got intimate," those fragments of rumor fused into something larger. Suddenly, that hotel meeting became myth. The world filled in the blanks with imagination and judgment. Every detail, whether true or invented, became evidence. For Meghan that night, if it unfolded as the accounts suggest, wasn't scandalous. It was symbolic. It represented everything she later spoke against. The unspoken pressure, the false opportunities, the constant threat of exploitation. If she did walk out of that suite untouched, it wasn't luck. It was calculation, awareness, and the instinct of a woman who had learned to read danger in the smallest shifts of tone. Weinstein, on the other hand, carried that memory like a scar. When power is all a man has, rejection becomes humiliation. His later comment might have been his attempt to reclaim dominance, to rewrite a moment where he lost control. In his mind, he wasn't exposing a truth. He was reminding the world that even those who escaped him couldn't erase his shadow. As the tabloids replayed the narrative of that night, analysts and former colleagues of both Meghan and Weinstein weighed in. Some dismissed the story entirely, calling it another attempt to weaponize a woman's ambition. Others said it sounded all too familiar. That was his method, one journalist who covered his downfall said. He would mix truth with lies so seamlessly that you couldn't tell them apart. That's how he maintained power, even after losing everything. What's undeniable is how that alleged hotel meeting became a turning point in Meghan's journey. It may not have been the event that defined her, but it was the one that crystallized her understanding of power. Afterward, she no longer sought approval from Hollywood's old guard. She began building a platform of her own, one that didn't rely on studio doors or producer favors. And yet, when Weinstein spoke her name from behind bars, all those years of independence, all those calculated choices, were dragged back into the shadows of that hotel room. The past has a cruel way of resurfacing, especially when someone else controls the narrative. In the end, Whether or not anything intimate happened that night matters less than what the story represents. It's a mirror held up to the system that created both of them. One a man who built an empire through manipulation, the other a woman who learned to survive by mastering perception. Their encounter, however brief, became a metaphor for Hollywood itself. Ambition colliding with exploitation, silence meeting exposure. And as the world debated the meaning of those few words, "We got intimate," the truth remained locked away, known only to two people. But truth in stories like this is almost irrelevant. Perception is the only currency that counts. The door of that hotel suite closed years ago, but the echo of it still lingers. And now, as the storm around Meghan and Weinstein intensifies, that echo is growing louder, pulling both of their pasts into a spotlight neither of them can escape. Power in Hollywood has always been a currency, and in the early 2010s, Harvey Weinstein controlled more of it than almost anyone else. He was a kingmaker, a man whose approval could change the course of an actor's career overnight. People feared him, worshipped him, and despised him in equal measure. To be part of his circle was both a privilege and a trap. The glittering surface of red carpets and champagne galas hid the darker truth underneath. Power wasn't just about money or influence. It was about control, and Weinstein had mastered it. Meghan Markle understood this. Maybe not immediately, but quickly enough to recognize the game being played around her. By then, she had learned that ambition wasn't a sin in Hollywood. It was survival. But ambition without strategy was a death sentence. She watched how others navigated the labyrinth of power, how favors were exchanged, alliances formed, and reputations made or destroyed over whispered promises. She saw talented women vanish after one wrong move, one wrong meeting, one refusal that bruised an ego. It wasn't a meritocracy. It was chess. Weinstein built his empire on that understanding. He didn't need to raise his voice to assert dominance. He only needed to remind people how much they owed him. The film industry, dependent on access and image, made it easy for him to blur boundaries between opportunity and exploitation. Invitations that began as business meetings often ended as tests of loyalty. Those who complied were rewarded. Those who didn't were forgotten. That was the machinery Meghan stepped into when she began climbing. She'd come from outside Hollywood's bloodlines, without family connections or inherited privilege. Every step she took had to be earned or negotiated. And she wasn't blind to the risks. A friend from her early acting days once said that Meghan had the instincts of someone who's seen the map of a minefield and memorized every step. She played the game smartly, learning when to charm, when to disappear, and when to reinvent herself entirely. But Weinstein's network was unavoidable. Even if she never worked directly for him, his reach extended into almost every project that mattered. He was woven into the very fabric of the business, funding festivals, sponsoring awards, influencing casting decisions. For women, that meant his shadow followed them even if they'd never met him. For Meghan, it meant navigating a world he quietly ruled without being caught in his orbit. That's where the secret economy of favors came into play. Everyone owed someone something, an introduction, a recommendation, a quote in a magazine. Nothing came free. Meghan understood the importance of cultivating goodwill among powerful men and influential women alike. She built bridges with stylists, journalists, producers' wives, and charity coordinators. On the surface, it looked like networking. Beneath it, it was self-defense. In an industry where reputations could be destroyed overnight, she was learning how to become untouchable. But the higher she climbed, the more the air thickened with unspoken rules. Some actresses tried to expose it and were quietly blacklisted. Others complied, convincing themselves it was the price of fame. Meghan's approach was different. She built distance into every relationship. She was friendly but not familiar, ambitious but careful not to seem desperate. It was that balance that made her dangerous in the eyes of men like Weinstein. She didn't need them as much as they needed to believe she did. Years later, when Weinstein dropped her name in that prison interview, people speculated about his motive. Some said it was revenge. Others thought it was nostalgia twisted by bitterness. But there's another possibility. Maybe he mentioned her because she represented something he couldn't control. Meghan had escaped both his world and his influence, and built a new identity far beyond his reach. For a man whose power relied on ownership, that loss was intolerable. Behind his words, "We got intimate," lay something that wasn't about physicality at all. It was about power. To Weinstein, intimacy meant access, and access was control. He used familiarity as a weapon, pretending closeness to keep people bound to him. Mentioning Meghan's name was his way of reclaiming power he no longer had, a reminder to the world that he had once been close to everyone who mattered. Meanwhile, Meghan's silence after his statement only amplified the story. The lack of denial became its own kind of confirmation in the public's eyes. Her team debated strategies. Should they confront it, sue, issue a brief rebuttal? But Meghan understood the deeper psychology of scandal. Responding meant giving Weinstein a stage. Ignoring him meant starving the fire of oxygen, even if it burned her That was all it took. 5 seconds of audio, and the world went up in flames. Within hours, the clip had been uploaded, deleted, and re-uploaded across multiple platforms. Journalists scrambled to verify its authenticity, while PR teams tried to contain the wildfire. Meghan's representatives issued no immediate comment. The royal press office declined to respond. That silence only fueled the chaos. By the next morning, every major outlet in Los Angeles and London had joined the chase. Talk shows dissected every syllable of Weinstein's statement, analyzing tone, context, motive. Some said he was delusional, fabricating connections to stay relevant. Others argued there might be truth hidden beneath his manipulative language. The ambiguity was irresistible. After all, Hollywood thrives on scandal, and when royalty becomes part of the script, the spectacle multiplies. Behind the scenes, the journalist who conducted the interview found himself hunted by both sides. Weinstein's legal team demanding retraction and media networks offering blank checks for the full transcript. He claimed he hadn't intended to release the footage, that someone inside the prison's communications office had leaked it first. But no one believed him. Everyone wanted to know, why would Weinstein, after years of silence, choose now to mention Meghan Markle? Those who knew Weinstein best described him as a man incapable of coincidence. Every move he ever made had been strategic, from greenlighting billion-dollar films to manipulating careers behind closed doors. To believe he casually dropped Meghan's name was naive. Theories multiplied, some claiming he wanted revenge against the Hollywood elite who had abandoned him, others suggesting he aimed to taint Meghan's image precisely because she embodied everything his victims became: powerful, vocal, untouchable. Still, there was something personal in his tone when he said her name. The way he lingered on it, the faint smirk in his voice. That subtle inflection hinted at memory, not fabrication. And that made the story infinitely more dangerous. Soon, whispers began to surface from the old Hollywood corridors. Assistants, event coordinators, makeup artists. People who had been invisible back then but were now eager to talk. One former publicist, speaking anonymously, claimed she remembered Meghan attending a charity event hosted by a Weinstein-affiliated foundation in Beverly Hills around 2013. It was a small crowd, she recalled, mostly industry insiders. Meghan was there to network like everyone else. I saw her talking to Harvey at the bar. He liked her immediately. That single recollection reignited the controversy. If they'd met at least once, Weinstein's statement no longer sounded entirely implausible. The tabloids took that fragment and built empires of speculation. Photos of Meghan at unrelated events were repurposed into alleged sightings. The room went silent the moment the clip surfaced. It was grainy, recorded somewhere deep inside a prison interview room, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing off the concrete. And then came the voice no one expected to hear again, the unmistakable gravel of Harvey Weinstein. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What he said next sent ripples across Hollywood and into Buckingham Palace alike. Meghan Markle, he muttered, pausing for a moment before adding words that no one saw coming. We got intimate. Those 3 words ignited a firestorm. For years, Weinstein had remained silent, hidden behind steel bars, his name synonymous with scandal and power abuse. But this wasn't about his past victims or the fallen empire of Miramax. This time it was about Meghan, the Duchess, the actress, the global brand who had carefully rewritten her story from Hollywood dreamer to royal visionary. But could this revelation unravel it all? Was this the crack in her golden image that no palace PR team could fix? Before we dive into the chaos that followed, let's rewind. Because to understand the weight of what Weinstein said, we need to understand where it all began. The intersecting paths of a once feared producer and an ambitious actress who dreamed of breaking into an unforgiving industry. Hollywood was a battlefield of illusions, and Meghan was determined to conquer it. But what if the price of success came with whispered deals and hidden favors, the kind no one dared talk about until now? This video isn't about gossip. It's about the dangerous power of silence, ambition, and truth. It's about a man known for weaponizing power and a woman who built her empire on reinvention. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on the statement that could change everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle's past. And trust me, you'll want to watch until the very end, because what started as a passing confession soon spiraled into one of the most shocking Hollywood royal collisions in modern history. When Harvey Weinstein first appeared in court years ago, the world thought that chapter of his life was closed forever. The film mogul who once decided careers with a phone call had fallen from grace, branded by his own sins. Reporters expected remorse, maybe denial, but never names. Certainly not Meghan Markle's. The question became immediate. Why her? Why now? What was he really trying to say from behind those prison walls? The media went wild. Tabloids threw headlines faster than lawyers could issue denials. Social media erupted with theories, some claiming this was Weinstein's twisted attempt at revenge, others suggesting he was hinting at something bigger, something the palace didn't want the world to hear. In just 24 hours, hashtags linking Meghan to Weinstein trended worldwide, resurrecting ghosts from her Hollywood past she thought she'd buried forever. But here's where things get interesting. This wasn't the first time Meghan's name had been loosely connected to Weinstein's orbit. Long before the royal titles and Netflix deals, Meghan had moved in circles that brushed close to his empire, attending the same charity events, crossing paths with people on his production rosters, and working through agencies known for courting his approval. In the film industry of the early 2010s, Weinstein's shadow touched almost everyone trying to make it big. And Meghan, young and ambitious, was determined to make her mark no matter what it took. It's easy to forget now, with her royal glow and carefully curated image, but Meghan's journey wasn't built on privilege. It was built on persistence. She faced rejection, long nights waiting tables, endless auditions. But behind every yes in Hollywood, there were 10 whispered no's. And sometimes the yes came with conditions. Powerful men expecting favors, unspoken rules, and career-altering exchanges. That's what made Weinstein's words so haunting. When he said, "We got intimate," the world froze. Did he mean physically, emotionally, professionally? Was he hinting at a deal, a collaboration, or something darker? The more people tried to decipher it, the deeper the mystery became. Insiders who had worked at Miramax during Meghan's early years recalled her name floating around conversations about small roles and auditions. She was seen as charming, eloquent, the kind of woman who knew how to navigate power without directly challenging it. But what if that very perception of being both graceful and strategic was what drew Weinstein's attention? He was known for identifying ambition like a bloodhound. Imagine being Meghan then, a struggling actress on the verge of breaking through, suddenly finding herself in the orbit of the most influential producer in Hollywood. For many, it was an opportunity. For others, it was a trap. And now, years later, with her life transformed, the idea that Weinstein might still hold a secret from that time was enough to shake the palace's composure. Behind closed doors, PR teams scrambled. Every photo, every interview from Meghan's Hollywood days was re-examined. Every name she once worked with was rechecked. Silence became the new strategy, but silence can often sound like guilt to a world hungry for scandal. By the middle of that week, talk shows were dissecting every angle. Some commentators claimed Weinstein was fabricating stories to regain relevance. Others believed he was simply being cruel, reminding everyone of his reach. But a third group whispered that there might be fragments of truth hidden in his vague confession. After all, the line between rumor and reality in Hollywood has always been thin. And then came the second part of the leaked interview, the one that deepened the mystery. When pressed for clarity, Weinstein allegedly smirked and said, "She knew what she wanted, and she got it." That statement, loaded, ambiguous, and dripping with implication, hit like a thunderclap. What did she get? A role? A favor? Or something much bigger? A pathway that would ultimately lead her to the royal gates of Windsor? At this point, the narrative shifted from curiosity to crisis. News outlets started connecting dots that might not even exist, weaving timelines, comparing event photos, speculating about unseen connections. Meanwhile, inside Kensington Palace, tension grew. Meghan and Harry, who had been promoting a charity project, suddenly went quiet. No interviews, no public appearances, just silence, and that silence only amplified the noise outside. But beneath all the chaos, one truth remained undeniable. Harvey Weinstein's words, no matter how manipulative or distorted, had reopened a chapter Meghan thought was sealed shut. In an industry where power is currency, intimacy can mean many things. And now, with her reputation intertwined with royalty, even the smallest suggestion of past entanglements had consequences that stretched far beyond Hollywood. The middle of our story begins here, in that uncomfortable space between truth and performance. Meghan has spent years crafting her public identity as a voice for women's empowerment, advocating for survivors and speaking against exploitation. Yet now, the man most infamous for exploiting women had uttered her name in the same breath as intimacy. The contradiction was too explosive to ignore. Critics pounced. Supporters defended. The battle lines were drawn not only across social media but also in the corridors of influence. Meanwhile, Weinstein's motives remained murky. Was this confession a final act of desperation, an attempt to drag others into his disgrace? Or was it something else? A veiled attempt to expose hidden deals within an industry that has always thrived on secrets? Either way, the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted, and public perception, especially in the era of viral outrage, rarely offers room for nuance. As the story unfolded, older interviews of Meghan resurfaced. Clips where she spoke about toxic environments in Hollywood, moments where she described her early struggles, took on new meaning. Viewers began parsing every facial expression, every pause, every laugh, searching for hidden guilt or buried pain. And somewhere in the midst of it all, the line between victim and participant blurred. The end of this introduction brings us to a crucial crossroads. What if Weinstein's statement wasn't just about Meghan, but about something symbolic, the intersection of ambition, morality, and reinvention? What if this was less about scandal and more about how far people are willing to go to escape their pasts? In a world obsessed with image, a single confession, true or false, can undo years of careful construction. And that's where our story truly begins. Because in the coming chapters, we're going to trace the web of connections, the whispers, the denials, and the truths that neither Hollywood nor the monarchy wanted to confront. We'll look at how power, once shared in silence, became weaponized through exposure. And most of all, we'll ask the question no one has dared to. Did Harvey Weinstein really have an intimate connection with Meghan Markle? Or is this another calculated move from a fallen man desperate to pull others down with him? One thing is certain, when he said her name, he reopened wounds that stretched from the film studios of Los Angeles to the palace walls of London. This isn't just another tabloid scandal. It's a test of narrative, of control, of who gets to own the truth in a world built on deception. The truth, or what passes for it, starts here. As the noise around Weinstein's confession grew louder, the story began to split into two versions. One told by the media, and another whispered behind the scenes. Reporters were chasing angles, experts were offering psychological analysis, and royal watchers were dissecting every second of Meghan's public silence. Yet, behind all that noise, there was something haunting about the timing of Weinstein's words. It wasn't just what he said. It was when he chose to say it. Think about it. The man had been silent for years. His empire destroyed, his reputation gone, his influence erased. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, he mentions Meghan Markle. Some believe it was no accident. To those familiar with Hollywood's dark ecosystem, Weinstein's move looked deliberate. A carefully planted grenade meant to remind everyone that even from a cell, he still had power. Mentioning Meghan's name was like lighting a fuse under one of the world's most scrutinized women. He knew what her name meant now. He knew the kind of chaos it could unleash. But what if there was more to it than revenge? What if Weinstein's reference to Meghan wasn't about scandal but survival? Prison insiders later claimed that Weinstein had grown obsessed with telling his side of stories that the media ignored. To him, the world had painted him as the ultimate villain, and he wanted leverage, something that would make people listen again. Dropping Meghan's name wasn't random. It was strategy. She represented power, redemption, and global fascination. Everything he'd lost. Still, the choice of words, "we got intimate," carried implications far beyond publicity. Those words broke through every layer of Meghan's carefully managed image. Her team had spent years crafting her as a symbol of dignity, resilience, and modernity within the monarchy. The idea that she might have any personal link to Weinstein struck at the heart of that narrative. Public sympathy began to shift. People asked the same question again and again. What did he mean by intimate? Different theories emerged overnight. Some commentators said Weinstein used the word in a manipulative way, not referring to physical closeness but emotional familiarity or mutual understanding. Others claimed he meant it literally, that there was more to their connection than professional proximity. No one could prove anything, but that didn't matter. In the digital age, perception is truth. Once the association was made, it became part of Meghan's story. And yet, for every accusation, there was an equal wave of disbelief. Friends and supporters of Meghan came forward, calling Weinstein's words nothing more than a desperate man's lie. They reminded the world that Meghan had built her career independently, working small roles and speaking openly about the challenges women faced in Hollywood. To them, the idea that she needed Weinstein to advance her career was absurd. But once again, the truth didn't matter. The mere mention of her name in that context was enough to plant doubt, and doubt spreads faster than facts. Inside Buckingham Palace, sources described the atmosphere as tense. This wasn't the kind of scandal that could be brushed off with a short press release. The royal family had already endured years of media warfare, from Meghan and Harry's explosive interviews to their ongoing feud with the British press. But this was different. This connected Meghan not to a family disagreement, but to one of the most disgraced figures in modern entertainment. And for an institution built on image, that connection was poison. Harry, according to one insider, was livid. He saw it as a direct attack, not just on Meghan, but on their efforts to rebuild their lives in America. The Sussexes had carefully constructed a brand centered on empowerment, empathy, and new beginnings. Weinstein's words threatened to undo all of it in one breath. The couple's silence was not indifference. It was calculation. The less they said, the less there was to dissect. But in the world of public opinion, silence is often misread as guilt, and that silence began to feed the story. As the introduction deepens, a pattern starts to appear. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a collision between two empires built on illusion, Hollywood and royalty. Both thrive on perception. Both rely on storytelling. And in both, the truth is rarely simple. Weinstein's confession didn't just challenge Meghan's integrity. It challenged the idea that anyone in power can ever fully escape their past. And yet, for every accusation, there was an equal wave of disbelief. Friends and supporters of Meghan came forward, calling Weinstein's words nothing more than a desperate man's lie. They reminded the world that Meghan had built her career independently, working small roles and speaking openly about the challenges women faced in Hollywood. To them, the idea that she needed Weinstein to advance her career was absurd. But once again, the truth didn't matter. The mere mention of her name in that context was enough to plant doubt, and doubt spreads faster than facts. Inside Buckingham Palace, sources described the atmosphere as tense. This wasn't the kind of scandal that could be brushed off with a short press release. The royal family had already endured years of media warfare, from Meghan and Harry's explosive interviews to their ongoing feud with the British press. But this was different. This connected Meghan not to a family disagreement, but to one of the most disgraced figures in modern entertainment. And for an institution built on image, that connection was poison. Harry, according to one insider, was livid. He saw it as a direct attack, not just on Meghan, but on their efforts to rebuild their lives in America. The Sussexes had carefully constructed a brand centered on empowerment, empathy, and new beginnings. Weinstein's words threatened to undo all of it in one breath. The couple's silence was not indifference. It was calculation. The less they said, the less there was to dissect. But in the world of public opinion, silence is often misread as guilt, and that silence began to feed the story. As the introduction deepens, a pattern starts to appear. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a collision between two empires built on illusion, Hollywood and royalty. Both thrive on perception. Both rely on storytelling. And in both, the truth is rarely simple. Weinstein's confession didn't just challenge Meghan's integrity. It challenged the idea that anyone in power can ever fully escape their past. By the third week after the confession, the headlines had evolved from speculation to obsession. Talk shows debated whether Meghan should issue a statement. Online forums were flooded with so-called insiders claiming to have seen her at events Weinstein hosted. Old photos resurfaced, images that had once seemed innocent but were now pulled apart for hidden meaning. A blurred background figure at a charity gala, a guest list from a 2013 premiere, a handshake caught on camera, everything became evidence. But amid the frenzy, something unexpected happened. A few journalists began to question whether the story itself was part of a bigger manipulation. Weinstein had always been skilled at bending narratives. Could it be that he dropped Meghan's name not out of confession but as bait, knowing the media would do the rest? The thought was chilling. Even from behind bars, he could still weaponize fame. For Meghan, the cost of that weapon was personal. Friends said she felt blindsided, trapped between wanting to defend herself and refusing to dignify Weinstein's claims with a response. She knew the rules of the media game. Once you speak, the story doubles in size. But once you stay quiet, it never dies. It was a lose-lose situation, and she was caught in it. As we approach the turning point of this introduction, it becomes clear that Weinstein's statement was not an isolated event. It was the spark that reignited long-simmering questions about Meghan's rise, her alliances, and the people who helped shape her path before royalty. To understand the full weight of what he said, we must explore not only what happened between them but also what their connection reveals about the machinery of fame itself. A machinery that devours truth, repackages it, and sells it back as entertainment. The final moment of this introduction brings the viewer face to face with the central question that will drive everything that follows. Was Weinstein's confession a cruel fabrication, a half-truth twisted by resentment? Or was it the unfiltered fragment of a reality Meghan fought to bury under titles and palaces? The answer, whichever it is, threatens to reshape both their legacies. And as the world watches, one thing is certain: silence can only hold for so long before it cracks. Because when power and truth collide, something always breaks. And in this story, that break has only just begun. When the prison gates clanged shut behind Harvey Weinstein, most people assumed the world had heard the last of him. The mogul who once ruled Hollywood with an iron grip had been reduced to a cautionary tale. A man stripped of wealth, status, and credibility. Reporters moved on. Producers avoided his name. Even his former allies erased him from memory. For nearly 5 years, his voice disappeared entirely, until a late-night recording surfaced from an interview that was never meant to see the light of day. The journalist who conducted it wasn't famous. He was a freelancer chasing a dying story, hoping that Weinstein's notoriety might resurrect his own career. What he didn't realize was that he was about to capture something explosive. In the leaked recording, Weinstein's tone was unervingly calm. "You want truth?" he said, his words deliberate, almost performative. "I worked with people who begged for attention. Meghan Markle was one of them. Smart, charming, and yes, we got intimate." The pause that followed was heavy enough to choke on. That was all it took. 5 seconds of audio, and the world went up in flames. Within hours, the clip had been uploaded, deleted, and re-uploaded across multiple platforms. Journalists scrambled to verify its authenticity, while PR teams tried to contain the wildfire. The moment Weinstein's confession hit the public sphere, the media exploded. Headlines spun in every direction, each one more sensational than the last. Weinstein claims he and Meghan Markle were intimate, blared one tabloid. Another shrieked, "Royal scandal?" Weinstein drops shocking claim about Duchess of Sussex. The story moved faster than anyone could track, traversing the Atlantic in hours, infiltrating social feeds, talk shows, and celebrity blogs. The firestorm was fueled by ambiguity. Weinstein had provided no specifics, no timeline, no corroborating evidence, just a name and a phrase loaded with implication. That ambiguity became a canvas for reporters, commentators, and influencers to project their narratives. Some presented it as a salacious admission. Others spun it as a metaphor for professional interaction. Yet others suggested it was a calculated manipulation meant to destroy Meghan's public image. The story had become a Rorschach test, revealing more about the reader's biases than the truth of the encounter. Television networks seized the opportunity. Panels of so-called experts dissected every syllable of Weinstein's statement. Some speculated about the timeline, suggesting the encounter took place during her early Hollywood years. Others tried to decode his inflection, tone, and body language. Every pause, every hesitation was analyzed for meaning. Social media amplified each interpretation, often distorting them into viral content. Memes, hashtags, and comment threads transformed a single uttered phrase into a global phenomenon. The tabloids, as always, pushed the story further. Headlines ran in bold across morning editions. The Duchess and the Mogul, what really happened? Or Hollywood horror meets royalty, Weinstein speaks. Each article hinted at scandal without proof, relying on innuendo and speculation to keep readers engaged. The cycle was self-perpetuating. Ambiguity generated clicks, clicks justified coverage, coverage fueled more speculation. For weeks, the story dominated not only entertainment sections but political commentary, lifestyle blogs, and even international press outlets. Analysts noted a troubling pattern. Weinstein's statement had effectively created a dual narrative, one where Meghan was a victim of association, and one where she was complicit in whatever he implied. The former appealed to royal supporters and feminists, the latter to skeptics, gossip enthusiasts, and critics of her celebrity ascent. Each side debated endlessly, often citing the same sources or non-existent evidence, demonstrating how a vacuum of information could become a battlefield. Meanwhile, Meghan's silence remained central. Every journalist wanted a reaction, every commentator speculated about motives, and every media outlet probed for confirmation. But her team stayed tight-lipped, refusing to confirm or deny any details. Legal representatives issued statements that were deliberately vague, focusing on the inaccuracy of exaggerated media interpretations while avoiding direct engagement with Weinstein's claims. In effect, silence became a tool, though not without its risks. Public opinion fractured along predictable lines. Supporters lauded Meghan for her composure, her ability to withstand public scrutiny without capitulation. They noted her continued philanthropic work, her measured statements on other issues, and her overall grace under fire. Critics, however, saw silence as evasive. They argued that a woman of influence should confront allegations directly, particularly if they are as sensational as a prison confession from a man of Weinstein's notoriety. This schism amplified polarization, making the story not just about Weinstein or Meghan but about broader cultural debates on accountability, privilege, and narrative control. The international press picked up the story with renewed vigor. European outlets analyzed the potential impact on the monarchy, while American media framed it within Hollywood's broader scandal narrative. In every region, the same questions emerged. What really happened? Why now? How will this affect Meghan's image and influence? Analysts noted that the timing was almost perfectly aligned with a lull in other major news, ensuring maximum exposure and minimal competition. Social media magnified the frenzy. On Twitter and Instagram, hashtags trended for days. Hashtag Weinstein confession, hashtag Meghan Markle, hashtag royal scandal. Influencers and commentators weighed in, offering theories that ranged from the absurd to the deeply analytical. Some recreated timelines of Meghan's career to speculate where she might have intersected with Weinstein's sphere. Others created visual montages pairing old event photos with snippets of Weinstein's quotes. In a matter of hours, a statement made in a small interview room thousands of miles away became a global spectacle. Even charitable organizations and advocacy groups were drawn into the storm. Some used the story as a teachable moment about power dynamics in Hollywood, discussing how women navigate complicated professional environments. Others criticized Meghan for not addressing the claim publicly, suggesting that silence could inadvertently normalize Weinstein's behavior. Each response, no matter its intent, further fueled the narrative. Internally, Meghan's team monitored everything meticulously. They tracked the speed of social engagement, noting how stories evolved from fact to interpretation to outright fabrication. Legal advisors prepared potential defamation claims while communication strategists plotted responses designed to minimize exposure without giving Weinstein further attention. It was a delicate balance. Too little and rumors festered. Too much and the story escalated beyond control. By the second week, the media firestorm began to produce tangential stories. Pundits discussed the broader implications for the monarchy, linking the incident to prior controversies and speculating about internal palace tensions. Hollywood retrospectives examined Meghan's early career in light of Weinstein's statement, often exaggerating or misrepresenting events to draw attention. Even lifestyle publications found angles, connecting Meghan's fashion, philanthropy, and public appearances to the narrative of resilience versus scandal. Throughout this storm, the ambiguity remained central. Weinstein's original statement was deliberately vague, and every attempt to clarify it only reinforced the speculation. The more people tried to define intimate, the more elusive it became. It was a masterclass in narrative manipulation, a reminder that control over perception is often more powerful than control over fact. Yet the firestorm also revealed Meghan's resilience. Despite the relentless media attention and endless speculation, she continued her public work, attended charity events, and maintained her composure in appearances. Her silence, which many initially misinterpreted, began to transform public perception. Gradually, some commentators shifted from criticism to admiration, recognizing the strategic discipline required to withstand such an assault. Ultimately, the media firestorm demonstrated the mechanics of modern scandal: ambiguity, amplification, and polarization. Weinstein's words provided the spark, the media provided the oxygen, the public supplied the fuel. By the time the story began to fade from daily headlines, it had left a lasting impression on cultural memory, a cautionary tale of power, silence, and narrative control. The implications for Meghan were clear. Public scrutiny is relentless, and ambiguity can be weaponized. But for those who study media dynamics, the firestorm also served as an example of resilience, strategy, and the power of silence in controlling one's narrative. Meghan's silence didn't stop the storm. It reframed it. Inside the palace, the reaction to Weinstein's statement was immediate, intense, and shrouded in secrecy. Courtiers and senior aides convened urgent meetings, some lasting late into the night, to assess the potential fallout. The monarchy is an institution built on image, tradition, and control. Any public link between a royal family member and a disgraced Hollywood producer threatened to disrupt all three. Advisors scoured old photographs, correspondence, and event logs, looking for even the faintest connection between Meghan and Weinstein, no matter how trivial. Every detail mattered, and none could be overlooked. King Charles, already navigating multiple family controversies, reportedly grew frustrated. According to insiders, he saw the situation as a direct challenge to the monarchy's carefully curated reputation. For decades, the royal family had survived scandals, affairs, divorces, and leaked documents, but this one was different. It wasn't just about internal dynamics or the press. It was about an external figure dragging the family's image into a toxic Hollywood scandal. Meghan's association, even if merely insinuated, carried global implications. The palace's communications team scrambled to contain the narrative. Drafts of potential statements were written, revised, and discarded. "We cannot acknowledge allegations we cannot verify," one memo read. "Any response must protect the institution, not the individual." The emphasis was clear. The monarchy must remain untouchable, regardless of Meghan's public image or personal experience. This approach, however, created tension with Meghan herself, who was reportedly frustrated by the lack of direct support. Prince Harry, fiercely protective of his wife, was reportedly furious. Friends claimed he saw the situation as an attack not only on Meghan but also on their shared legacy as modern royals. He understood the dynamics of media manipulation, having witnessed the same press scrutiny that had contributed to his mother's tragedy. Harry pushed for a measured but firm response, advocating for transparency and controlled media statements. Meghan, however, insisted that silence was the best weapon. "They thrive on chaos," she said to him in private. "Responding gives them exactly what they want." Meanwhile, palace staff began discreetly contacting individuals from Meghan's past, from Hollywood colleagues to mutual acquaintances, seeking confirmation or refutation of Weinstein's claims. Every email, phone call, and conversation was treated as a potential risk. The palace was essentially conducting an internal audit of Meghan's entire life before royalty, searching for evidence of association that could be leveraged against her. The very fact that they had to do this underscored the unprecedented nature of the situation. The story quickly reached foreign diplomats and international media. Royal watchers in Europe debated whether this could affect the family's reputation abroad. News outlets in the United States, India, and Australia analyzed the implications for Meghan's dual nationality and philanthropic engagements. The palace faced a rare problem, a personal controversy that could not be contained within national borders. Its implications were global, and the potential damage extended far beyond gossip columns. According to sources familiar with palace operations, internal tension began to rise. Traditionalists viewed Meghan's silence as problematic, while modernists understood it as a calculated strategy. Some aides reportedly suggested that she release a controlled statement to prevent rumors from escalating. Others feared any response would be dissected, misinterpreted, and weaponized. The debate highlighted a fundamental clash of philosophies: preservation of image versus assertion of personal agency. Throughout this period, Meghan's privacy was relentlessly invaded. Paparazzi monitored her appearances, reporters scrutinized her charitable work, and social media users dug into her past with surgical precision. Every public engagement was reinterpreted in the context of Weinstein's comment. Did her presence at a gala signal complicity? Did a philanthropic speech suggest she was masking guilt? Public perception, often divorced from reality, became a secondary prison. Inside, Meghan reportedly felt cornered but determined. Advisors tried to guide her, but she had learned from years in Hollywood that control was an illusion. Every move could be manipulated, every word turned against her. Her decision to maintain silence was not passive. It was deliberate, a way to reclaim power by refusing to participate in a narrative written by others. Harry supported her choice privately, even as he expressed frustration publicly. The palace, however, could not ignore the storm entirely. Security protocols were reportedly heightened, with additional personnel monitoring potential media intrusion. Communications teams prepped contingency plans for any international fallout, including potential questions during diplomatic visits or public ceremonies. Meghan's schedule was scrutinized for any engagement that could be misrepresented or taken out of context. Every move was tactical, every appearance a potential risk. Meanwhile, the royal family's lawyers and media consultants advised on defamation and potential lawsuits. While they could not directly counter Weinstein's statements, they ensured that the family was legally protected. This dual strategy of legal preparedness and media management highlighted the unprecedented complexity of the situation, a former Hollywood scandal colliding with centuries-old royal protocol. The internal pressure began affecting public appearances. Sources claimed Meghan became more measured, more deliberate in speeches, and more cautious in public interactions. The emotional toll was evident to staff. Yet, in true form, she maintained the appearance of calm composure. The royal family watched closely, balancing concern for her well-being with the necessity of maintaining an unassailable public image. By the third week of media frenzy, analysts outside the palace began speculating on internal panic. Headlines such as "Royal Staff Scramble After Weinstein Comment" and "Palace on Edge Over Meghan Controversy" captured the public imagination. Insiders described an environment of controlled chaos, the monarchy trying to manage an unpredictable story while upholding centuries of decorum and secrecy. The psychological dynamics were intense. Meghan, who had endured relentless scrutiny in Hollywood, was navigating a new ecosystem with stricter rules, higher stakes, and fewer allies. Every decision carried consequences, every interaction risked exposure, and every silence could be misinterpreted. The palace, accustomed to centuries of internal crisis management, was confronting a modern scandal amplified by global media, social platforms, and instantaneous communication. Ultimately, the royal panic underscored a harsh reality. Even the most insulated institution is vulnerable when personal history collides with public fascination. Weinstein's words had not only threatened Meghan's personal reputation, they had tested the resilience of the monarchy itself. For advisors, staff, and family alike, the challenge was to preserve dignity, manage perception, and protect a member whose past was suddenly under global scrutiny. And through it all, Meghan remained outwardly composed, quietly observing, strategically silent, and carefully navigating a storm that could have consumed anyone less disciplined. Her poise under pressure would later be interpreted as strength, but at the moment it was survival. A lesson learned from years of Hollywood's harshest realities.